Hiya gamers! Undertale's underground is filled with a bunch of cheeky little munchkins, but a group that has always stood out is the ghosts. They are clearly stated to work by a different set of rules than both the monsters and the humans, meaning they are their own separate thing. I've always assumed they were just ghoul-type monsters, ghost-like entities but not actual ghosts of real people that died. However, what if I were to tell you that there is a notable amount of evidence that the ghosts are not only reincarnations of people, but also reincarnations of all 7 of the humans that died in the underground? Thank you to Lizzie who gave me the idea for this video and helped a lot with the script. This would not exist without me seeing her idea on a Discord server and asking about it, so big thanks there. The ghosts in Undertale live among the underground but are clearly separate from the monsters. Even though boss monsters work slightly differently, all monsters seem to have the same basic biological rules despite the variation in their appearances. However, ghosts clearly work under a completely different set of rules. We don't know for sure if they have souls or not, and they seem to be invincible. They can also possess different forms and pass through objects, meaning they aren't physical in nature. The entire way the ghosts feed themselves seems to be different from both monsters and humans. Humans have human food and monsters seem to have their own magical food with healing factors. The ghosts are stated to have ghost food, ghost drinks, and even ghost flavors, which is very bizarre. Ghosts aren't loyal to Asgore and or the monsters in the same way the other monsters are, which is quite notable. Mettaton literally planned to kill Asgore, which is very funny, and in his neutral ending he makes the underground human-friendly regardless of how many monsters you kill. He also desecrated a memorial fountain for Asriel, which is pretty insensitive and definitely doesn't seem like something the other residents of the underground would do. Mew Mew also said she'd like to take your soul and try to cross the barrier, which also seems rebellious against Asgore. As far as I can remember, this makes these two the only characters alongside Flowey who have negative intentions towards the king and seem disloyal to monsters. These stark differences the ghosts have from the monsters probably mean they are a separate thing entirely, and possibly ghosts that formed from the essence of the humans. This would explain how they ended up in the underground to begin with, as it would be weird for them to be banished alongside the monsters as they aren't monsters themselves. Also, if in the war the monsters had ghosts on their side, they probably would have won, as ghosts are invincible, so it's possible that they appeared in the underground after the humans they spawned from died there. In fact, it's basically the only explanation for their existence I can think of. They're invincible but definitely not eternal beings. They're clearly younger than some of the older monsters like Jerson and Asgore, so they would have had to have been brought into existence in the underground. They aren't physical biological beings, so they probably can't reproduce sexually. This isn't a long family lineage of ghosts or anything. Also, in pretty much every culture, ghosts come from dead people. The first definition of ghost is literally an apparition of a dead person. Toby Fox has made it very clear that ghosts are not monsters and operate by different rules, so I'm honestly shocked I've never considered that they are straight up ghosts of dead humans. There are 7 ghosts in Undertale, which matches the 7 humans who died in the underground. I know what you're thinking. 7 ghosts, aren't there only 4? No, you cheeky little munchkin, there are actually 7. As well as Napstablook, Mettaton, Mew Mew, and the Ruins dummy, there are actually 3 more possessed dummies that appear in New Home that nobody ever remembers. If this idea is true, that would mean both that souls and ghosts are left from the humans after death. In this case, I think the souls are the things that contain the memories and emotions, whereas the ghosts seem to contain the personality and knowledge. I don't think these ghosts have memories of their time as a human, but I'll get back to that later. Chara's ghost is most likely the one that possessed the dummy in the ruins. This is the closest a ghost is located to Chara's burial spot, and when you encounter this dummy, it's actually the first time the name Chara appears in combat. Chara's name is notably absent from the UI in the first Flowey encounter. Now that does raise some questions. If this Ruins dummy is Chara's ghost, does that mean they're the same entity that follows us around the whole game and evolves into a demon in genocide? No, I don't think so. Toriel took Chara's body and buried them in the ruins, so I think the Chara that follows us is probably a reincarnated version of Chara that Frisk revives in some way with their determination after landing on their grave. We really don't have a good idea of how this works, but it definitely had something to do with determination and Chara's corpse, so I guess it's somewhat similar to how Flowey was made. This entity contains their memories, unlike their ghost, which would just be an entity born from their personality. Yes, this does mean there are 2 existing Chara entities at the same time, which is odd to think about, but oh well. So if Chara is the Ruins dummy, which of the other ghosts are which soul humans? Napstablook is obviously Patience. They sit around all day in the ruins and in their house. Their cousins wanted to move on to bigger things, whereas they kinda just wanted to chill. They are so patient that it was arguably to the detriment of their relationships with Mettaton and Mew Mew. They are incredibly chill and patient. The Cyan Soul's equipment is in the ruins where Napstablook likes to go to chill. The patient soul's backstory is one of the odder ones, as it appears they didn't make it past the ruins, which makes their death kinda mysterious. One interesting thing is that Napstablook and Toriel both like snails, and Toriel definitely cared for the patient's soul at some point. So Napstablook's interest in snails could have subconsciously emerged from their time with Toriel. At the farm it's also stated that they don't know who Asgore is, which is very weird for a resident of the underground. Their house is also a lighter shade of blue. One thing I'll just mention now is that the ghosts seem to have some connection to Muffet, but I have absolutely no idea what it is. The motifs in the music in this game are very meaningful, and Napstablook's house theme, his alarm tone in Deltarune, and the Mad Mew Mew theme all have the spider dance main chorus in it. This is by far the weirdest musical connection I can think of. It's 100% intentional, I just can't think of any explanation for it. Musical connections like this always show a link between characters, but I just don't see how Muffet relates to the ghosts. Toby Fox has gone out of his way to add this motif to the ghosts in the Switch release of Undertale, in Deltarune Chapter 2, so I find him enforcing this theme in new releases very interesting. Mad Mew Mew is probably Justice. She always seems to base her attack on you around wanting to avenge her cousin for how you treated them. She also first encounters Frisk by the dump, which is where Caddy and Bratty found the Yellow Soul's equipment. She possessed Undyne's combat training dummy, and Undyne is the most Justice-themed monster. Her theme song is literally called Spear of Justice, and Justice is her primary motivation in all three routes, so it makes sense that the Justice Soul would admire her. This might be a stretch, but her final Mew Mew design also has notable yellow highlights. She generally seems to feel that she deserves better than she gets, which matches her want for justice. I think Mettaton is Perseverance because the purple soul matches the heart on Mettaton EX's chest, as well as one of the purple soul's pieces of equipment being a notebook, which could relate to Mettaton as he was established to have made journals as a ghost. Also, the first definition of perseverance on Google is persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. The word perseverance describes the story in his journals quite well. It was definitely perseverance and putting himself out there that got him to the place he is. The Perseverance soul equipment is found in Waterfall, which is where Mettaton's house is. Even though it's more pink, his house's color is still the closest to the Perseverance soul, including the interior. He is so associated with purple that Muffet, the character who actively loves purple, is enamored by him. The kindness, bravery, and integrity souls can be applied to the three ghosts we encounter in New Home. I can't decipher any characterization from anything either of these three say or how they say it, so apply whichever soul to whichever dummy you'd like. The ghosts refer to themselves as cousins, which may seem weird at first, but I think it's fair to assume that they aren't biologically cousins, as the ghosts don't have sexual organs and presumably can't breed. They are the only entities of their kind in the underground, so I think it makes sense that they'd band together and assume they're related anyway. They're more of a found family, I think. I doubt they were raised together, as Mew Mew can't even remember the name of the ruins dummy ghost. One thing I think I should mention in relation to Mew Mew and Mettaton is that they are clearly intended to be trans parallels, and they work way better as that if they were once human. As humans we are assigned genders at birth, and if you are trans you transition from one to another. That's a completely different thing to being a non-binary entity before transitioning to a gender. If Mew and Mettaton were originally human before becoming genderless ghost entities, it makes their transitions make a lot more sense. Them transitioning to another gender after becoming ghosts and truly finding themselves works. Another option would be that their transition could be them rediscovering the gender they identified as humans, which matches quite well with the idea that the ghosts don't have their memories from their time as humans, regardless of whether they were cis or trans beforehand. I probably prefer the first option though, as I don't want to set a precedent for characters such as Napstablook that they need to transition to find themselves. And if the ruins dummy is a Chara ghost, they're most likely already non-binary anyway. One weird thing is that Mettaton appears to have been about to call Napstablook he before correcting himself and saying they. This could mean that Napstablook was male before becoming non-binary, which raises questions about what the ghosts do and don't remember, because I thought they started as non-binary. This really throws off my thought process because it could mean Mettaton and Napstablook knew each other as humans when Napstablook went by he/him, or something, and that completely goes against what I said about the ghost's memories. I'm really not sure what to make of this. It could be that Napstablook was male as a human, and whilst Mettaton might not remember this specifically, it could be knowledge he has in his mind regardless of how conscious he is of it or not. Mettaton just doesn't seem like the type to misgender someone. It seems that the ghosts have quite good knowledge of the surface and get into much more specific detail lifestyles than a lot of the other monsters do, which could show they have knowledge about human life. In the dummy fight, she mentions pretty store windows and things. Mettaton has a weirdly in-depth understanding of show business and human entertainment. You could argue this is through him watching things found in the dump, but Mettaton is mainly focused on live TV and entertainment, which isn't really something you obtain physical media of. In the Mad Dummy fight, there is a really random bit of dialogue where she seems to get embarrassed about using magic, and asks you to forget about it. Humans don't express themselves through magic in the same way monsters do, so maybe this line of dialogue is a lingering feeling that she shouldn't have relation to magic. One thing that's interesting about the ghosts is whether they count as having souls or not. Flowey absorbs everyone's souls at the end of True Pacifist, but Mettaton is the only ghost who was absorbed, and he also happens to be the only ghost who we know for sure is fully fused with his form at that point. Napstablook and Mad Mew Mew weren't absorbed and also happen to not be fused with a form. Mew Mew doesn't know Frisk's name regardless of whether you do their fight before or after Pacifist. If you did it before, you can speak to her at Waterfall and she only refers to Frisk as you. She also doesn't mention the event at all. Napstablook says he wasn't absorbed because he was inside and closed the curtain, but there are loads of monsters in the underground who were probably inside and stuff who still got absorbed, so I don't buy this. How fused a ghost is with their physical form seems to count toward how much soul they do or don't have, or at least how alive they are considered to be. The fact that the two ghosts that aren't fused didn't get absorbed and don't know Frisk's name, but the one ghost who does know Frisk's name and was absorbed happens to be the only one fused at that time is too notable for me to ignore. I'm sure it means something. If the ghosts actually are all reincarnations of the dead humans, it does add more purpose to them. I really like all of the ghost characters. Mettaton is my favorite character in the game alongside Flowey, but even I can admit their hyper-specific and unique lore is strange. I don't really know why they're so weird and different, but this theory adds a unique purpose to them which I am quite fond of. Why else would Toby even make them ghosts? They can't be spirits of the monsters because there would be way more of them, and it's very notable that there just so happens to be the exact amount of ghosts as there are dead humans. So yeah, there's actually a weird amount of evidence for the ghosts being reincarnations of the humans. There's also basically no notable counter-evidence that comes to mind in Undertale, unless I'm forgetting something really significant. Deltarune I guess makes things weirder. I can't really justify why all of these ghosts of dead humans would live here in this universe, but oh well. To be honest, I can't really justify why all of these characters live together despite the difference in circumstance anyway. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I don't fully buy into this theory or anything, but the more I dug into it, the more interesting it became to me, and the amount of evidence I found was oddly surprising. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and if you didn't, feel free to plant a bomb on my step-uncle's wheelchair so next time I visit him I fucking blow.